Welcome to Content with Character, the weekly podcast that'll give you the momentum you need to create content with more ease, clarity, and laughter. I'm your host, content copywriter Emily Aborn, and I'm all about unconventional marketing approaches. I believe in your big ideas, and I'm excited to help you share them in a way that's distinctly you. You're so vain. You probably think this about page is about you. Wait, is it? Is it not? Maybe you've heard it go both ways. I know that I certainly have. In this episode of Content with Character, we are going to settle this debate once and for all. Well, maybe not. But I'll tell you this, we will definitely be talking about your about page. And you'll walk away with some ideas you can implement right away. Hi, welcome back. From the sounds of it, from what folks boxed me and messaged me and emailed me and shared with me on social media, you all got to work last week after the episode on writing about yourself, writing your bio, which is so exciting. That's what I want to inspire you in each and every week, is something that you can take action on right away when you're done listening. And ideally, I'd love if you were having fun taking action. That would be the perfect blend. I also had some people reach out and ask if I could just write the damn bio for them, to which I was like, yes, let us do it. And we were off to the races. So lots of good stuff from last week's episode. And to recap and reflect before we move into today's topic, if you missed it, it was basically about how to talk about yourself, be it in your LinkedIn profile or in a standalone social media post. And I gave you 5 questions that you can really dive into and ask yourself before sitting down to write about yourself. And I also got you started with a free bio builder download, which is going to be again in this week's show notes, because if you want it, you can print it out and you'll get even more resources on how to write your bio, how to write a better bio. So today we're going to get into more of the conversation about talking about yourself, writing about yourself, and at least another place we're going to focus on where you need to kind of plunk that copy, where you need to have that copy about yourself. And this one comes with some controversy, if you will, or should I say some conflicting viewpoints. I mean, if you read the title of this episode or listened to the intro, you already know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the about page on your website. There are 2 general camps: the argument that your about page is about you, and the argument that your about page is not about you, it's about your clients. You've probably heard and seen it both ways. So before we actually get into it and break it down and maybe solve the mystery, I want you to ask yourself which one you think is true. As you sit here starting this episode, or take your walk starting this episode, or get in your shower, which one do you think is true? Is your about page about you, or is it about the clients that you're trying to attract? So I'm going to leave you to ponder that just for a quick moment while I introduce myself. And I always like to introduce myself because I know that we are always getting new listeners. So if you are new here, welcome. And if you're not, then you well know that I am Emily Aborn. I'm a content copywriter, which means I do blogs, bios, emails, social media content banks, and lots of website copy. About pages included for women entrepreneurs. I'm also the host of this podcast, Content with Character, and the She Built This podcast, which you can find in the show notes. And on that podcast, I interview women entrepreneurs about stuff that I'm curious in addition to this information, because my goal with all of this is to help others to learn, explore, and grow as well. When I'm not behind a podcasting mic or banging away on my keyboard, I'm probably in the woods fighting off mosquitoes with my dog Clyde by my side, taking a hike or a walk with a friend, or reading 2 books at once. Okay, enough about me. Or maybe not enough about me. Who's to say? Either way, let's talk about these about pages, shall we? So I would like to propose, and I'm sure you saw this coming, that there is a third side to the coin, which I didn't share with you at the beginning, and that is that the about page is about both of you. I really believe that the About page is more than a spot to kind of dump your bio, okay? It's more than just your entire life story. And I do really think that it is far more than just like the me show, which I'm going to get into in this episode. I think that an about page is where we show our clients a clear way to self-identify so that they can know that you are the right person for them. And in order to do that, I think you kind of need to show them both of you. Are you confused? Good. Me too. Just kidding. Your about page is really like a part of the journey. And in fact, next to your homepage, for most solopreneurs, the about page is the second most visited page on your website, meaning people are on your homepage, they found you, and then before even going to your services or your products, they go to your about page. I tend to do this when I'm looking on somebody's website. I personally really like working with people that I know, that I like, and that I trust. So I do head over to the About page to kind of see if we are going to jive. And I might do that even before I look at what they offer or how much it costs. I think that you can tell a lot about what it's like to work with somebody from their About page. And sometimes that's completely null and void because they're not at all like their About page. Sometimes I have definitely judged a book by its About page and I end up with something either wildly better than expected or wildly worse than expected. But in most cases, I would say like 98% of the time, I coulda, shoulda, woulda trusted my gut based on what I saw on the About page. So for most solopreneurs, About is the second most visited page on your site. The odds are it is probably the same for yours as well. People want to know about you before they consider working with you. So here's what I often see on people's About pages when they come to me to write for them. Number one, I see somebody who appears to have struggled for hours to talk about themselves, but then they ended up with just like a little blurb or bio that takes like 2 seconds to read. It doesn't really tell you much of anything. And number two, the other thing I see is that somebody has taken the time to tell you their entire life story. And before you know it, you actually know more about their neighbor's grandmother and her cat Whiskers than whether or not you are a good fit for this person and they're a good fit for you. In fact, someone just came to me recently. She just came to me with this question, like, what should I put on my About page? She was kind of going back and forth on how to structure hers. So what we ended up doing was a strategy session together to talk it out and actually like lay it out for her right then and there on the call. But one of the things she was tossing up before we got on the call, she had sent me this link to a coach's About page. And no, I will not be saying who this person was, but I'll tell you what I saw on the page. So at the very top of the page, it was like about, and then it said how I got into coaching, and then a few other things you might want to know about me. Now, this was followed by a list of 12 things, and each one of those 12 things, from I'm a rock star, I'm a rebel, I'm an empath, each one of those 12 things had an entire like paragraph underneath it. And from there, we take a nosedive right into her credentials, which again is a list, this time with bullet points. Now, I'm not like throwing shade at this lady. There is truly no wrong here, okay? It isn't wrong. It's just that for some of us, going to that page would be a turnoff. Like we go to somebody's About page to, yes, learn about them, but it can be a little bit of a turnoff if it is just like completely about them overload. So I just think that it's important to remember that there is an artistic way to do both. Like you can show them you, and you can also show them them. And that's why I thought it was so important to dedicate an entire episode to this, because I really want us to have About pages that bring people in, make them want to lean in and get closer, not repel them. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about today. So let's suit up, because I don't think an About page is to be ventured into without proper preparation. You will need the following. You will need the following items. You will need the bio we wrote for you from last week's episode. You will need an understanding of who you want to work with. You will need an understanding of what you offer, what sets you apart from the rest of the people doing exactly what you do, any fancy letters after your name, and who knows, maybe a fun fact or two. Or a boring fact or two, like totally your choice. Optional items, some SEO keyword research and some competitive research. This will also help you to figure out what sets you apart from the rest of the people doing exactly what you do. The goal of any page on our website, and like really anything we create content-wise, is to make a connection. I'm always saying that content is a way to create a bridge. Even when you're selling and promoting, you are making a connection and you are creating a bridge. I have something you want. Here's how to get in on it. And here's the path to get there. So, some questions that you might want to think about before you sit down to write your about page is, how can I really make this bridge from myself to the person on the other side? Some other things you might want to think about is, and these are just kind of like questions that my clients will come to me asking, should I write my about page in the first person? So I think it depends on a couple things. First of all, is the rest of your site written in first person or third person? Meaning, is it say, hi, I'm Emily, all over my website, or does it say meet Emily all over my website and then like talk about me as if I'm kind of not in the room? So it depends. I would also ask you, like, how big is your team? How big do you want your team to be in the future? Like, if in the very near future you plan on like having a really, really big team, you might want to use we, because that's part of your goal to expand. You don't want to have to go through your entire page and fix everything, or your entire website. Who are they going to be encountering when they reach out? Like, is it always you? If it's always you and you don't have a team and you think someday you're going to have a team, you might want to use I. I cannot answer what's right for you. I'm just saying like kind of some of the things we talk out with people. Do you want to be seen as one person, or do you want to be seen as an organization or a team? So those are just like some things to think about when you're considering first person or third person. There is a time and a place for a third person bio for me. And that is when I'm being introduced on somebody's podcast or introduced as a guest speaker. Everywhere else, I tend to use first person because it's just me. I don't have a team. I don't think that I have any hopes and dreams of having a team. And when people reach out to me, they always encounter me. I'm always the person responding to their email. And I think, as I said, it's going to be that way for at least the foreseeable future. The other thing you have to think about, because your about page is going to be a spot where you do want to show your personality. So I want you to think about, like, what is that? Like, what is your voice? Is it quirky? Is it fun? Is it sassy? Is it silly? Is it serious? Is it sophisticated? Is it professional? Is it playful? Is it compassionate? Write how you speak with, obviously like the right grammar, or maybe not with the right grammar. Like, I have a client who uses 3 exclamation points all the time. So what we did on her about page, we used 3 exclamation points at the end of a sentence. And that is not proper grammar. But I say, like, sometimes those artistic licenses, those creative licenses are A-okay. I like to toss in phrases like buckle up or womp womp and you had fair warning. Like, things like that is a very natural way for me to write, because that's naturally some of the things I say when I speak. Now, if you get stuck, you can ask yourself this question. Well, how do I want people to feel when they meet me and work with me? And then how can I bring that feeling into my about page? Like, you want it to be consistent when they go to your website and when they meet you in real life. Like, that is the biggest compliment somebody could give you, is when they say you are exactly like you are online. Like, that is a huge, huge compliment. So I want you to think about what that would actually look like. Like, what would it look like for somebody to go to your about page, read about you, get to know you, and then when they hop on a discovery call with you, they're like, oh my God, you're exactly like you are on your about page. Or like, I just knew I needed to work with you because your personality was shining through on your about page. So, okay. Those are like the questions to ask yourself to get started. And the about page is not really the place. You don't need to feel like you need to tell your entire life story. I remember when I first did my website a couple years ago, I sat down and was working on my about page. And I wrote this story, which included a little piece about my grandma, okay? Because when I was like 10 or 11 years old, my grandma gave me this little white book, and she told me that it was for my stories and for my writing. When I wasn't reading when I was a kid, I was like writing little stories and poems and probably like very dark diary entries, like, dear diary, today was a sad day because we ran out of fluff and I had to eat peanut butter and jelly instead of peanut butter and fluff. Anyway, stuff like that. But anyway, it was a really, really thoughtful gift, and it showed me that my grandmother really saw me. Like, she was always buying me book series. So as soon as I would like binge one series, she would buy me another series. But this book was really, really special because she noticed that I was always, conjuring up these little stories and stuff. And she got me a place I could create the story. So you know what I did with that little book? Do you know what I did with that book? I tucked it away in a little bookshelf, because I could not think of the perfect story. I could not think of the perfect thing to write in it. And I didn't want to get those pages marred up basically with anything that was less than perfect. So on that about page, I went into this whole story, that whole entire story. And I was talking about how as entrepreneurs, like, we can't be tucking away our messages, waiting for them to come out exactly perfectly, blah, blah, blah. Don't wait till it's perfect. Bring your dream to life, your voice, your vision, your message. It's time. Okay. So to be honest with you, it's a great story. It's very inspiring. It makes for a very nice email or a social post, or like I'm using here, a piece of a podcast episode. But on my about page, I went back way too far, and I was like suddenly talking about the tinsel on the Christmas tree where I'd unwrapped the gift. And like, I just really needed to bring it back, bring it home, Emily. But more importantly, I needed to focus on the person who was reading this about page and like why they were actually here. And I sort of missed the mark with that story. Like, it sort of didn't really accomplish what I was hoping it would. So a reminder, it's really great to include storytelling on your about page, but think about the kind of storytelling that you want and whether or not it's conveying the message that you want. Remember, your website is a journey, and this is a piece of the journey. It doesn't need to tell your life story, but it can. It can include parts of it. It can include your why, or what brought you to do the work that you do, or an event in your life that kind of like was the turning point, right? So it doesn't need to be your entire life story. And it may also include pieces of your life story or include stories therein. So just keep coming back to the question when you're doing that, when you're like sitting down considering what story you're going to include or whether or not you need to include your life story. Just keep coming back to whether or not this is building a bridge, or if suddenly it's just becoming all about you and maybe the kind of like sweaters and culottes that your grandmother used to wear. Okay, the other thing I wanted to bring up is on your about page, I've seen some people name it different things. So, for example, meet Sally versus just like about me. And in the process of creating this episode, I was like, ooh, I kind of like meet Emily. I like both. I mean, I don't really think that you can go wrong. And I don't really have a great reason on why you would do about me, about Emily, meet the team, our story, mission, or just about. All of those are solid options. But I want to say this. If you decide to get cute and quirky, just remember, it still needs to be findable and navigatable. I made that word up. But don't get too crazy here. Don't do like why we're awesome as like the title for your about page. Like, I'm talking about like in the menu, right? Like, people might not know that why we're awesome is your about page, or, the super sleuth behind your business, or the genius behind the brand. Like, I would pretty much say that stick to about, meet the team, our story, mission, meet so-and-so. Just keep it simple. You can be cute and quirky later, because people need to still find themselves their way there. And most of the time, we're all kind of using websites in similar ways because websites are all rather similar. So just keep it easy for people, okay? And I would say that about like pretty much any page on your site. Like, just kind of like go simple. So let's talk about the actual structure of the about page. Right off the bat, you kind of want to acknowledge like who's reading this page. Say hi, if you will. Think of it like a conversation. Like, you don't just blast off into a long monologue about yourself and your many accolades and accomplishments when you first strike up a conversation with somebody. So start with a little warm up, welcome them in, greet them. Some people like to do it like this. Hi, I'm Betty Jean, the life coach for women entrepreneurs like you who are ready to achieve at your highest level. That's a nice option. Others might describe the person right off the bat. So I've seen this. Big dreamers, thought leaders, visionaries. So they kind of like right off the bat described who's on the page, and then they introduce themselves to solve this person's problem. And then still other people, I've seen them dive just straight into the pain points. Now, like, are you tired and overwhelmed? Are you sick of being exhausted? Now, I don't love pain points, or should I say, I don't love building your entire strategy on them. I think you need to acknowledge them. My friend Erin Alilla of the Talk Copy to Me podcast, she says it very well. She says, if your best friend came to you saying that her life was like falling to pieces, you wouldn't just ignore what she was feeling and being like, hey, what are you having for lunch? And that said, we both have a hard time when we see pain points that are like, you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You find yourself waking up every day with no will to live. You're sinking further and further into overwhelm and existential life crisis. And then the service provider or whoever's page you're on, like they swoop in as a magical unicorn that's going to like solve all their problems for you. I don't know. Something is just off for me about it and I don't love it. The other thing I sometimes see is that like right after like this deluge of pain points, you get something like, I know because I've been there, or I see you because I am you, or I was you. It can be a way to show people that you really do see and understand them. But I think if we're not careful, it can actually kind of like lose the desired effect, like the effect we're going for. And it can make you seem a little bit less than empathetic, or like maybe you don't actually understand. So it can actually kind of like repel people away rather than draw them in. So obviously choose your own adventure. You know, you do whatever feels right for you, but that's just my 2 cents on it. So you start by greeting them, you say hello, you describe a little bit of who they are, and then you introduce yourself as the solution. And I would go a little bit further here into how you help them. So for example, on my page, after I tell them who they are, I add in a few more benefits on how it helps their business to be seen and free up their time when they hire out the writing piece. So then after you've kind of said who they are, how you help them, maybe go into it a little bit more, like what the benefits are to them, then I step in. It's time to fire up those engines and start talking about yourself. And I like thinking of it as like this. Like when we're telling them about ourselves, it is so that they can know whether or not we are the best choice for them or not. So here's a great one I saw on, this is actually on Erin Alilla's website. She says, so let me tell you how I can best serve you as a copywriter for websites. This is where you kind of get that chance to like talk about what sets you apart, but you're doing it through the lens of how it benefits them. Does that make sense? I'll give you a couple more examples. This one is actually from my website. I'm a collaborator by nature and I play nice with others. If you're working with a website designer, I'd love to bring it all together and elevate your brand, with my website copywriting and SEO solutions. Okay, so I am a collaborator by nature and I play nice with others. Like that is about me. But do you see how I'm bringing it in as a benefit to them? So I'm saying, you know, if you have a website designer, I actually would work with that website designer, bring it all together to elevate your brand. And if you need a website designer, I have recommendations on that too. So I'm kind of like showing them the benefit in that piece of me. Here's one I saw from an interior designer. I get to know my clients on an individual basis. So yes, it's about her, but now she's bringing it into why this really benefits the client. She says, I love learning about what makes you tick, what you love and what you don't, and I listen closely to your wants and needs. So see how that just turns it into like, here's the benefit to you, the homeowner. And last example from a website designer, process is incredibly important to me, and I have crafted a streamlined, simple, and stress-free design process. Here's the benefit to them. This not only ensures your project will run seamlessly, but it also lets you know exactly what to expect at every stage of your project before we even begin. So see what I mean? Like, yes, you're talking about yourself, but you're also sharing about how that piece of you, that piece of your selfness is a benefit to the person that you're working with. So let's call that the what sets me apart section. And it's going to be a little bit focused on your industry, like what really is different about you versus other people in your industry. And then do not fear. Now we get to head into like some seriously fun fact territory or the personal stuff, or if you prefer, I know some of you will prefer your credentials, organizations you're a part of, things like that. And just like a little insider tip here, if you are a part of an organization or you have some sort of credentials behind your name that were like you got a certification from some place, you can include a link to that place that opens in another tab, because those backlinks on your website going to other credible sources are really, really helpful for your overall like SEO website strategy. Now, remember, your about page does not need to contain everything about you. It's not a resume. Like I said, it's not your life story. You can have other places for people to link out to, other pages on your site, other adventures they can take. This is what I love about thinking about our websites. It is a journey. I want people to have more places to explore on my website from any one given page. So, some things you might want to include: a call to action, calls to action that are natural to you. And on your about page, that's either probably going to be a call to action that brings them to your services or brings them to work with you. I had an interior designer I worked with recently, and she said that she didn't want to say "work with me" on the buttons because she thought that it sounded kind of like desperate. So she wanted the buttons to say "contact us about your project." Think about that and what sounds natural to you. And also think about where you want them to go from your about page. So it's kind of up to you to sprinkle those breadcrumbs and guide them to that next step, that next place on your site. Other things you might link out to on your about page, if you are a speaker, you might have a speaker page or a podcast guesting page. I have a link to that right on my about page. So on my about page, it has a spot where it does say my speaking topics, and then it links out to my speaker page, and it shows kind of all the places I've spoken at, what I talk about, why I'm a good collaborator, things like that. You might also on your about page have other ways to connect with you on social media, LinkedIn, etc. Some people have a little spot on their about page where they're going to have little icons that recap their services or that lead people to that next step, which is to go learn about this service. And then the other thing is, if you have a very long detailed process and it is important for you to share this process step by step, if it's long, I would just kind of make that a separate page that is your process page, and you can link to that from your about page. But again, just think of it like this, your website is kind of your own little ecosystem. It's your own web. It's your own web. So bring people throughout it to get to that next step. And on every page you basically take them to, you want there to be a call to action that guides them along. Okay. So to quickly review and summarize, our about pages are about us. They are about them and they are about us. So it's kind of like a we. So focus on that you and me approach. Our nature is to be concerned with our own problems first and foremost, to make sure that we are getting our message out there, to make sure that we are getting seen for who we are, to market ourselves, right? But remember that a visitor to our website, they're trying to solve their problems and they are thinking about themselves. And yes, they want to learn about you too, but you can help by describing, you can help them by describing how you solve their specific problems and what it's like to work with you. So why you are a good choice for solving their specific problems. And on that note, I just want to remind us, which I often do, always strive to be as specific as you can. Speak to them like it's just one of these people, one of your clients, one of the people you love working with coming to this page. Okay, today was short and sweet, and I think we solved the mystery of, is your about page about you? The answer is yes. And it's also about them. Next week, we're going to be talking about actually talking about yourself, like using your voice. So some things you can try to alleviate any awkwardness that you might feel when you're networking or chit-chatting in person or when you are asked to be a podcast guest. So I want to talk about talking about yourself when you're actually like using your voice. And I will have a little bit of story time baked into next week's episode because I have lots of networking stories, but also some from podcasting where maybe I didn't need to say quite so much about myself. So in the meantime, while you're waiting for next week's episode to come out, if you are working on your own about page and you need a hand, we can either chat that out in a strategy session. I can do it for you and take it off your plate entirely. But if all signs point to like, I could use a little bit of help, Emily, I am going to be working on my about page. Just check out the links in the show notes or visit my website, emilyaborn.com, and I will be there to get you some help ASAP. You can also find a link to last week's episode and that Bio Builder download if that's something that you're working on too. Okay, I will chat with you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Content with Character. If you loved the episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast, rate, review, and share it with someone else you know it could help. For more content and visibility tips, visit my blog at emilyaborn.com and be sure to connect with me on Instagram at emilyaborn. I'd love to hear how this inspired you to take action.